Good afternoon. It's Lee Cassidy again, talking about our speakers for the event on the 21st. Shawn Meyers was due to join us a little earlier, about 12 minutes ago. But we had some technical issues, so he's joining us now. So I'll bring you in. Shawn, how are you?
Oh, I'm pretty good, and thank you for having me, Lee. I appreciate it.
So tell us a little bit about your background then, so people can get an understanding of the kind of experience you've had in technology and maybe something people don't know about you.
Sure. So I'm a DBA by trade, a SQL Server DBA specifically as of now. But I've been focused in IT and technology for the past 30 plus years. With that, I've been doing a lot of things with actually, as I tell people, I'm an infrastructure DBA, meaning I understand how infrastructure works and how the database actually uses the infrastructure. So I can mix the two and translate between the two groups. So when the infrastructure teams are complaining about, the DBAs asking for too much, I can come in and act as the moderator or translator between the two groups.
Okay. So, how important do you think that is in what we're talking about next week, which is digital transformation? How do you think, DBAs and infrastructure DBAs fit into that message?
Well, sure. We're definitely going to show some really cool technologies that Tintry's been working on to help with the digital transformation. So we understand what the database is actually doing and making the database the unit of measure, meaning we're going to track storage per database, no longer for LUNs and volumes.
Because I think a lot of people, when they think about digital transformation, they assume you're just going to be a greenfield site and start again and redevelop something new. But a lot of organizations have got a lot of history and a lot of data sat in their existing systems. So if they're looking at digital transformation, they've got to take that with them as well. So SQL Server, well, Microsoft SQL Server is going to be quite important to them, isn't it?
Exactly. So yeah, it's very rare you're going to find a greenfield with a database system these days. Yes, new application dev, but that's going to be a whole different structure. There's a lot of legacy, a lot of history. So we'll make sure we can show how SQL integrated storage on a Tintry platform can utilize your existing infrastructure and your databases to make them work properly going forward.
I think the other thing that you're reutilizing is people as well, because you've got all that experience and skills within your DBAs and your developers that have utilized SQL Server to this point. If you throw all that away and try and start again, you're wasting a lot of really important resources that you can utilize.
Exactly. And SQL Server is here. It's going to be here for a very, very long time. So all the knowledge you have on SQL Server and how to optimize and run it is all going to be relevant as we modernize our infrastructure processes. And that's what we're going to talk about, is modernizing how your infrastructure works, because we have less and less staff to operate these things, or at least flat budgets, but we have more and more things to manage and take care of. So we need to modernize the infrastructure so we can do more things for you automatically with less and less involvement from personnel in managing this process.
One of the things I've noticed talking to people around digital transformation is that there are some key areas that they're really concerned about. One is security. The second is high availability and data protection as well, because there's no way you want to effectively digitize your business and then not have access for both internal and external users to the system. So it's quite important that the system is very highly available. But I think the other thing is the ability to recover if there's an issue as well, because inevitably in technology we do have issues, whether it's a failing piece of hardware, whether it's actually a piece of software that corrupts data and things. So having the ability to recover is quite important as well. What were your thoughts in that area?
Oh yeah, I talk about that all the time. I mean, I tell people I could care less about your backup strategy. I only care about your recovery strategy. And of course, your recovery strategy will automatically lead to how you want to do backups. Because there are a lot of people who design a backup strategy to minimize impact on the backup process, but don't realize how much impactful it makes the recovery process longer, more difficult, or even impossible to do. So definitely it's there. And of course, with what we're going to talk about, the SQL integrated storage piece allows us to add more tools to our recovery toolbox, more things to consider. In fact, what I tell customers a lot of times is we'll spend more time discussing what technology method to use than actually utilizing the recovery methodology, meaning the decision takes longer than the actual work.
Yeah. And I think also, a lot of people are going to use this as a foundation to move forward into other types of technology. But I've seen a lot of people starting to utilize SQL Server within containers now. So they're just running the actual database, within that container, but it can be stored in the same way as it was before on the, existing infrastructure. You're just creating a different, hosting method for the application.
Correct. I mean, containers, you can run SQL Server inside of it, which is usually a smaller subset. And then you still have a backend SQL Server that has the aggregate from all the containers. And there's different variations and flavors of all of that. And your application design is going to determine, should the SQL Server be local to the container or should it be actually outside the container? And the great thing about us is we don't care where your database is. We'll find a way to make it manage and work for you.
Okay. So any other key areas that you're going to cover in your session that we need to highlight today?
The biggest thing I'm going to really show about is going to be visibility, because we've all had those meetings where people are complaining the database or the application layer is slow, and we all sit together trying to figure out that problem. And I'm going to show you some interesting things about the visibility so we can pinpoint exactly where those problems are coming from and solve them in minutes, instead of having hours or even days of people working on tests to figure out where our slowdown or why my database system is not working the way we expect it to be working. Because we all live in a shared world today, and it's very difficult in a shared world to see all the different facets of it to determine where the bottleneck is now at. And with this, I'll be able to highlight some ways to improve and easily identify exactly what we're trying to find.
And I think this is an area that's going to become more and more important, especially in the digital transformation side, because we're quite used to using monitoring to have an idea of performance of key pieces of infrastructure. But when we're looking at digital transformation, we might be looking at a specific database, but also we might be looking at it from the end user experience rather than from the infrastructure's experience. So how quickly the web server can serve data from that database out, but also looking at the end user who's off in their home working environment nowadays more often than not, and actually seeing it through a virtual private network with a web browser that's going quite slow for them. So that's going to become a really important factor when we start to do more of this digital transformation, that we need to understand that experience for the end user and how it makes them feel as well.
Exactly. I mean, I always talk about application-based SLAs, meaning we need to not just have a database SLA or a storage SLA or my network SLA. I need to have an application-based SLA. So it goes from top of the stack to the bottom of the stack, and I know what's acceptable, from an uptime, but also a performance basis. An example of that. The customer's using it. It takes 4 seconds between screen refreshes. Is that okay? When it's taking 4 seconds, do you happen to have a 5% drop of users transacting with your system, or do you have a 50% drop? When you get to 12 seconds or 15 seconds, that number gets much, much larger, obviously. So 2 to 3 seconds for screen refreshes is typically where you want to be at. And we need to figure out how we can measure that, because there's so many moving pieces in the shared world we're all in for the digital transformation, from, again, the front end website or application server all the way down to the database, and how it transacts back and forth between the network and the storage and all those different pieces. So we also got to figure out the visibility so we can measure each one of those quickly and determine what is causing the failure of that SLA, because it's no longer just, hey, my database is up. If my end users can't use it, my database doesn't matter if it's up, it's still down. The application is the key. And that's the biggest thing we talk about at Tentry. We are not really a storage company. We're actually an application modernization tool company, basically. It allows you to focus on the workload or the application being the core of everything. Whether it's per VM, per database, per your container concept, we want to make the workflow or the application the center of all of our thought processes. So when we're looking at things, we can figure out how my overall picture is working, and not just how we basically measure each of our silos.
Yeah, because that's quite important. end user experience, it's gone a bit slow, but where is it slow? And that's always been an issue, hasn't it? Identifying where the problem lies. Is it in the storage infrastructure? Is it in the virtualized environment, or in this new world of containers, a containerized environment? Is it the network connecting it all together? Is it the wide area network? Because now we're looking at it from a distance as well. So those things are going to be so important, and having those metrics to be able to identify which area the problem resides and dealing with it quickly, I think is a really important thing. Thanks ever so much for your time today, Shawn. So we just want to do a quick introduction to our speakers and also give a bit of an idea of what we're going to be talking about next week. So thanks ever so much for joining me for that. And I look forward to your session on the 21st.
Great, fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. I get so excited when I talk about SQL servers and how we're helping the DBAs fit in with all the extra demands, but also it helps alleviate a lot of the infrastructure storage admin roles. So now we no longer have that contention. We can now partner between the different groups to drive our business and drive the application forward, and no longer being basically a bunch of finger pointing processes.
Sounds good. Thanks ever so much. Have a good evening, and I'll see you next week.
Sounds great.
Thanks a lot.
Wait. Thanks.
Bye.